A very good evening to all of you. I welcome you all to the ICANN initiative, the Hindu and Indian Express analysis. We will start the day with the prelims theme of the day. Today we'll take up both culture and geography. And as I'm seeing, I have covered most of the very important topics or themes which can be asked under the prelims. So if someone has genuinely followed this and revised according to the theme of the day, then he or she must be feeling very confident about so many important themes that are repetitively asked in the exam. So we are almost coming towards the end of this prelims theme of the day because we have almost covered all the important topics. So today we'll take up culture and geography. So first you will have to make a list of the important handicrafts from different parts of the country. So you know that there are so many handicrafts, be it fulkari or chicken curry, kanta, ikat. So there are so many styles which so you'll have to make a list of these handicrafts from different parts of the country. And the second thing is you'll have to also make a list of the major tribes from different states. So you may have a match the following where the tribes is given on the one hand and then the state to which they belong or where they are found in majority are found are given on the other column. So you will have to match it, and these things are small things but are also easy to remember. They are not so very difficult. So just use a map and then visualize these tribes there. Don't just try to memorize. So that way you will be able to connect with that picture of the map into your mind. So you will recall that picture of the map where you would have plotted these tribes in the respective states. So that will help you to recollect and recall the correct information during the exam. So now we'll start with the topics of the day. So we will start with the first topic of the day, which is related to regulation of NGOs. Civil society organizations and NGO come under your GS syllabus too. So what this whole article was talking about was that now some NGOs have gotten their license cancelled under the FCRA Act. So you may have a question directly in the UPSC mains paper asking regarding the FCRA regulation of NGO, what are the pros and cons, an analysis of basically broadly the regulation of NGOs. So under that, one of the issues has always been the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act and the restrictions imposed on the NGOs under this act related to foreign funding. So any NGO, if it has to get any funds from foreign, any foreign donors are there and the Indian NGOs have to get funds from these foreign donors, then these NGOs will have to be registered under the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. But if they violate the regulations or the restrictions that are imposed under the FCRA Act, then their registrations or their licenses to accept donations from the foreign donors is going to get cancelled. So now in this regard, you have to understand first of all what kind of regulations will be imposed under the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. It may be that when the foreign donors are donating to the Indian NGOs, then the Indian NGOs will have to receive the money in a separate bank account. They will also have to state the purpose for which they are receiving foreign donations, and they will also have to make a lot of compliances, monthly reports, and how much of that money is used for what purpose. So all of that reporting they will have to do. So these are all some of the regulations which are imposed on the NGOs under the FCRA. So now in the recent case, some of the NGOs have lost their license under the FCRA and thereby they have lost the right to get foreign donations. So in fact, whenever you are talking about any topic in the mains answer, without data and without example, your whole answer is incomplete. So you must see that whenever you are reading any topic, you have some supporting data and some supporting example for that. So now in this case, when we are talking about the FCRA Act and the NGO regulation, so nearly 22,000 NGOs are at present registered under the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, and nearly 20,000 of the NGOs have gotten their licenses cancelled under the Act as well. So these are the number of NGOs which are now registered under the FCRA. And also talking about more data, 8 foreign donors were put in the government watch list under the FCRA Act between 2004 to 2014, and under the current government dispensation, that is from 2015 onwards till now 2020, 13 foreign donors have been put under this watch list under the FCRA regime. So this is related to the data about how the NGOs are regulated under the FCRA regime. And also talking about the example, you will have to mention a few example of the foreign donors or the NGOs whose licenses have been cancelled. So now some of the example is Compassionate International and the World Movement for Democracy. So their licenses has now been cancelled by the government. Sorry, it was not the licenses that was cancelled. These are the foreign donors, and during the period of last 10 years, these foreign donors have been put under the watch list. So when I say that some of the foreign donors have been put under the watch list, it means that any donations from these foreign donors will require the clearance of Home Ministry. Only when the Home Ministry clears, these foreign donors will be able to donate to the Indian NGOs. So this is about the regulation of NGOs, which you should know. What are the pros and cons of these regulations, and whether the FCRA regulations are too harsh on the NGOs, or whether these foreign donations comes with a foreign agenda which these Indian NGOs are trying to implement, or is it a way of putting in black money and all that. So this analysis of FCRA and the regulations of NGOs you must know. So what we have till now understood is about some of the foreign donors whose and the Indian NGOs whose licenses have been cancelled under the FCRA. So an analysis of this is very important from your mains exam perspective. Now we'll see the next topic, which is related to India-China relations. So in this, you have to know that recently there has been a defense ministers meet, that is the defense ministers of India and China. They have met in Moscow and they have discussed about the possible diplomatic solution for the standoff that has happened at the LAC. But however, this meeting between the defense ministers has been very disappointing one, because what has come out of this meeting is the fact that we have now realized after this meet how differently the two countries are perceiving the problem that's happening at the border. So we have completely different views about what's happening on the border. So an example for this is our defense minister Rajnath Singh says that we have to there has been a violation of the bilateral agreements, and we need to respect the bilateral agreements between the two countries, and what China has done is to violate these bilateral agreements. And what the Chinese defense minister has said is that Chinese defense minister has said that the entire responsibility is on India to withdraw the troops from the border, and China has rather in fact exerted the maximum restraint that it could, and India should now immediately withdraw its troops from the border. So this is what the Chinese defense minister has said. So looking at the statements of the defense minister, it is more than clear how differently both the sides are viewing this problem, and they are just blaming the other country for whatever has happened at the border. So however, we also know, in fact, the external affairs minister S. Jaishankar has told that the only solution, sustainable solution for this problem is through consistent, sustained diplomacy itself. So that is the only solution. But however, this talk and the contrasting views of the two countries has shown that there are a lot of differences, and it is only through a lasting dialogue and consultation and joint efforts that we can aim to resolve this dialogue, and that is not going to happen very soon or very easily also. So this is about the outcome of the recent defense minister meet that has happened in Moscow. The next topic is related to environmental or pollution issues, and this can also be used as an example when you're talking about India-Netherlands relation. So now an MOU has been signed between the state government of Andhra Pradesh and a Netherlands university on a program that's called as Waste to Worth. So this Waste to Worth program is about the crop residue burning. Every year, tons of the crop residue or the stubble is being burnt in the fields, in the agricultural fields by the farmers, because they do not have any way out, and that is leading to a lot of particulate matter pollution. So this stubble burning and the resultant increase in the PM levels is very much known in the case of National Capital Region, but is also prevalent elsewhere. So India and Netherlands have signed a project that's called as Indus Forum. They have what is called as an Indus Forum. Indus Forum means INDUS means India, Dutch, DU for Dutch, and SS for sustainability. So India Dutch Sustainability Forum or the Indus Forum. So under this, the two countries collaborate to find out some sustainable solutions to the environmental problems and issues. So now the state government of Andhra Pradesh and the Netherlands University have signed an MOU on a project that's called as Waste to Worth, where they will be taking the crop residue and they will be converting that and using that as a raw material in industries, which can actually generate more income to the farmers. So what what is said is that there is a lot of increasing global demand when we talk about bio-based or biodegradable products for packaging, for flooring, for energy generation, and for furnitures. So people across the world, industries across the world are looking for biodegradable options for packaging, for flooring, for making furnitures, and for generating energy. So in such a case, this crop residue can provide a very crucial raw material, a biodegradable raw material for coming out with biodegradable packaging, biodegradable flooring, biomass energy from this stubble remains, and also the biodegradable furnitures. So in such a huge demand at the global level can be actually tapped, and all the crop residues can be converted into something that is worth, which can be sold by the industries, and even the farmers can earn an additional income out of selling their stubble. So all of this is under the project that's called as Waste to Worth, and this project has now been taken up under the Indus Forum, which is India Dutch Sustainable Forum. So this you can also quote when you're talking about the issues of pollution, because one of the important causes of pollution is also the stubble burning. So in such cases, you can give the case study of the Indus Forum and this Waste to Worth project by the government of Andhra Pradesh, where it is going to convert the crop residue into biodegradable or bio-based packaging, flooring, energy, and furniture. So this is a sustainable way of handling the waste by also generating value from it, and at the same time not causing any pollution in the atmosphere. So this can be quoted both as an example when you're talking about India-Netherlands relation, and also when you're giving when you're writing an answer on pollution, in which one of the important causes is going to be the stubble burning. So the next topic is related to the basic structure of the Constitution. So anything that's related to the Constitution is a part of your polity GS2 paper. So under this, why this basic structure of the Constitution is in news is because Kesavananda Bharati, who was a seer of Kerala, on whose name we know the popular Kesavananda Bharati judgment of 1973, has now recently passed away. So this has made this entire topic also very important from the perspective of exam. So this is one judgment that we often use whenever we are writing any other answer also. And because this Kesavananda Bharati is in news this year, you can expect a full-fledged question on this. So what is the basic structure of Constitution? What is its relevance today? Do we need to revise it, or do we have a concrete formulated one that this should be the basic structure of Constitution, or should we keep it more evolving and dynamic? So these can be some of the questions that can be framed on this particular topic. But for now, also because this has happened right before the prelims, this can also be an important topic in the prelims exam as well, where you may be asked about which of the following are the part of the basic structure of Constitution. So you must know that this doctrine flowed out of the Kesavananda Bharati judgment of 1973. In this particular case, Kesavananda Bharati had challenged the Kerala land reforms law in the Supreme Court. But his advocate was Nani Palkiwala, so he saw a very good opportunity in this case, and he expanded this case to challenge all those actions by the government, which were actually the government during that time was the government of Indira Gandhi. So during that time, the government was changing the constitution by assuming unlimited powers to change the constitution. So the advocate Nani Palkiwala used this as an opportunity to expand the horizon of this case to include all those actions of the government which it was doing by assuming some unlimited powers to amend the constitution. So ultimately, under this judgment, the court held mainly three things, very important things that it held. The first thing it held was it was a right of the judiciary to undertake judicial review of the legislations. So in this, the Supreme Court upheld the judicial review which is a power of the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court upheld this power of judicial review of the laws that the Parliament has made. So that is the first thing. And the second thing it told was that it evolved the concept of separation of powers as well among the three organs of the government, that among the three organs of the state, that is the government, that is the executive, legislature, and the judiciary. So this judgment also evolved the concept of separation of powers. This is the second important part of this judgment. And as we all know, the most important part of this judgment is the Supreme Court held that while the Parliament and the government, it has the right to amend the constitution, because constitution after all is an organic, evolving, dynamic document which has to adopt and adapt as per the changes in the society. But it does not mean that the Parliament has unlimited powers to assert the rights, fundamental rights of the people, and then make drastic amendments into the constitution. So what the Supreme Court said was that there is something called as a basic structure, which is the heart or the core of the constitution, which cannot be changed by the Parliament. So later on in a series of judgments, it kept on laying down which of these are the form a part of the fundamental structure of the constitution. It can be separation of power, it can be judicial review, it can be federalism, it can be secularism, it can be rule of law, it can be independence of judiciary. So all of these are some of the those principles that form the basic structure of the constitution. And this basic structure doctrine that flowed out of the Keshwanand Bharati case mainly emphasized the fact that the Parliament has the power to amend the constitution, but these amendments should not be so drastic that it is violating the basic structure of the constitution itself. So the basic structure of the constitution, which may comprise of all these things, should never be violated by any amendment of the constitution. If any amendment that is done by the Parliament which violates any of the basic structures of the constitution, then such an amendment is going to be declared null and void by the court. So this was the importance of this judgment, and for the purpose of mains we may have an analysis of this. This topic per se is very important for this year, but now let's restrict ourselves from going into in-depth discussion of this and focus right now on prelims. The next topic is related to wildlife protection, which is a part of your GS3 syllabus under the broader topic of environment. And what we are going to discuss now could be used as a case study in questions that talk about wildlife protection issues or the proposed solutions for them. So we are talking about Tirunelli Kudrakote Elephant Corridor. So this was an elephant corridor which the state government, the Kerala government, had supported its creation 15 years ago. So you have several lessons to learn from the creation of this elephant corridor. So let's understand why this is being mentioned and why it can be used as a case study. The first thing is that when this elephant corridor was created, not just the population of elephants but also the other species, be it tigers or spotted deer, their population also improved a lot with the help of creation of the corridor. So if you're talking about wildlife protection, creation of such corridors will definitely help. The second important thing why this case study is important is because this received the support of the Kerala state government. So without the government support, nothing can happen, and it was a state government that came out to support the creation of this elephant corridor. So it shows that for any conservation effort, the support of the state government is of utmost importance. The third important thing about this case study is that when this plan was formulated to build the elephant corridor, on the path of the movement of elephants, there were many villages where people had already settled. So this whole initiative involved the state government encouraging these villagers to voluntarily move out of their villages, and the state government also relocated these villages. So this shows how it is important to follow a model where there is not forced eviction of the villagers who are in the path of the corridor, but rather they are encouraged to understand the importance of having such corridors so that even the man-animal conflicts can be avoided. These villagers voluntarily moved out of the path which involved the movement of the elephants, and even the state government supported them to relocate elsewhere, and they were successfully rehabilitated. So for all these three important things, you can quote this example as a case study whenever you're talking about or you're writing a question on wildlife protection issues or measures that can be taken to protect wildlife. These were the other articles that weren't important from the point of view of exam. This tax pact was about the faceless assessment, which we have already discussed, and this is about the three language formula, which we have discussed as a part of the national new education policy and its flaws also. Then rest is the judiciary's in general flaws have been mentioned, have been analyzed, which again we have discussed the issues related to judiciary in a very detailed manner as part of our question answer discussion. So isn't much in all of these, and GST compensation and the federal issue, the fiscal federalism issue between the center and the states also we have discussed before. So all of these were either a repetition, they didn't have, though the topic was relevant, the material we have already discussed in much more great detail and richness before, and some of the articles that are not relevant from the exam point of view. Now we'll take up the prelims question in the current that was in news. So recently a ministry has announced that it's going to set up a NEST division. So you have to tell up NEST here means New Emerging and Strategic Technologies Division. So that is NEST division. Recently a ministry has announced that it is going to set up this NEST division. So you have to tell me what is this NEST division, what is the purpose, and which ministry has taken the initiative to set up this separate NEST division within itself. So that's it for today. Thank you.